100 Winters, Retracing the Great Race Against Death. Written by Nathaniel Hayes. Illustrated by Caleb Gingras. Chapter 15. Unalakleet. The final mile into the town of Unalakleet, crossing the bay, was polished sea ice. To the dogs, a village means the end of a day's work, food, and rest. So they sped up, excitement bubbling over. It was then that I realized I no longer had the power to stop them or even slow them down. Shortly thereafter, the dogs also came to this realization. Stopping 16 dogs is rarely within a musher's actual power. Even in ideal conditions, it's more about the dog's perception of your control. Normally, a trail-weary team only needs a gentle command and a tap on the brake bar to convince them to stop. But the steel studs on my brake had worn down the first couple of days of the expedition. They needed to be replaced with snowmobile track carbide studs. Since we were in the middle of the wilderness without a parts store, the mechanics on the team had swapped the steel spikes for steel screws. This patch job worked fine on the deep pack snow, but now, crossing a literal sea of glass, those flat-bottomed screws slid across the ice like blades on ice skates. Somehow, I managed to convince the team to stop. Jamie and Jeff had been in the village for several hours ahead of us. I expected one of them to come out onto the ice and guide us through the village to our dog yard, but they were nowhere in sight. Standing on the brake with both feet, I asked Caleb to shoot ahead on his snow machine to find our entry point into the town. Every time he passed, the dogs shifted directions, chasing after the machine like a compass to a magnet. Caleb returned from the outskirts with a report. The village trails weren't in yet. There were countless of random tracks where locals had driven down onto the sea ice from their yards, but no real trail through town. To make matters worse, the town had been plowing all winter, dumping a great mound of snow and ice on the south end where the road meets the sea. The dogs somehow knew there was a road on the other side, and they wanted to get there. Every time they were left to turn where they wanted, they turned to that mountain of snow and ice. Just then, 2 more snow machines appeared on the ice. One parked off in the distance to the northeast, about a quarter mile. Is that Jamie? I don't know. Can't tell. I'll go check. Caleb took off toward the snow machine on the inlet just as the second snow machine pulled up beside me. You made it. It's me, Jeff. Jeff Erickson? Great. Jeff was my host in the village, and through our correspondence before the expedition, we'd developed a friendship. 2 PKs, or preacher's kids, with a great love for the North. We hit it off immediately. Jamie fell asleep on my couch, so I told Jeff I'd come find you so he could rest, Erickson explained. Erickson told me there was no direct route to where we would camp the dogs, but I could follow him and he would guide me. This was fine, except the dogs didn't recognize him or his sled as part of our team. Jeff turned left, but Caleb had traveled right. The village lay straight ahead. The leaders were confused, impatient, and ready to run. I gave the okay to the team, expecting them to chase Erickson's sled. Instead, they swung hard to the right, following Caleb's direction of departure. This direction confirmed to the dogs by Caleb's returning snow machine. I jumped up and down on the brake, trying to produce a calm, low, and slow whoa. We weren't stopping. We were gaining speed. I shifted from trying to stop them to giving them trail commands. "Ha! Ha!" I commanded, and vodka obliged, somewhat. Now we were at a 45 degrees closer, but needed a full 180-degree correction. I yelled again, "Ha! Ha!" That corrected another 45 degrees to the left, but it was too little, too late. By the time they adjusted, we were closing in fast on that mountain of plowed ice and snow at the village's edge. At that moment, Caleb was over my right shoulder, Jeff Erickson was over my left, each about 200 yards away. Cursing underneath my breath, I'm ashamed to admit, I surrendered to the fate and the will of the team. What was their will? Up and over. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, and they were going to that village over that mound. It wasn't an exaggeration to say the mound was more than 2 stories high, snow and ice piled relentlessly. The dogs dragged me and the sled up as though we weighed nothing. Something along the top slowed them, thankfully, so I was able to stop and survey what lay ahead when I reached the peak. Deep 4 to 8 foot crevices split the mound, separated by narrow ridges barely a foot or 2 wide. The dogs jumped from ridge to ridge, sometimes slipping and being pulled out by their teammates. I was suspended over these deep cracks, the sled teetering on narrow ridges. I couldn't hit the brake or kick off of any ice boulders without risking a post-hold leg or flipping the sled. I had to let the dogs choose their footing and trust their instincts. And what awaited us at the bottom? A plowed, hardtop parking lot coated in glare ice. I remember muttering before giving my dogs the permission to descend. And this is where I blow out my knee again. Just a year earlier, I was running Iditarod champion Mitch Seavey's A-team down a steep ridge. The sled started to flip. I kicked out my left foot to push off the trail and right myself. As fate would have it, the spot where my foot landed was a hole in the trail, likely from a moose or a previous team. It swallowed up my leg to the knee while descending at full speed. I felt and heard things tearing in my knee. I barely made it back to the kennel. Mitch urged me to see a doctor. Why? It's bad. I know it's bad. But I came here to help train the team this season and run an Iditarod qualifying race, and that's what I'm going to do. Thankfully, Mitch allowed me to be stubborn. The next week, I ran the 300-mile Willow race with only one functioning knee. We came in 13th out of 26 top-notch teams. When I returned to Maine, I went to the hospital. After ultrasounds, MRIs, and x-rays, the doctor said, "Mr. Hayes, I don't know how you're standing here and don't understand how you ran a 300-mile race. Your ACL is destroyed and must be replaced. Your meniscus and quadricep are badly torn and require surgery." By the time of this expedition, my knee had stiffened but healed enough to hold up during training. Still, I secretly feared the coastal ice would claim my knee, and with it, the success of this expedition. Now, I stood teetering over a minefield of deep, ice-hardened crevices, each one ready to swallow my leg with a single misstep. To descend, I would have to keep both feet planted on the runners. I felt like Job in the Old Testament when he said, "That which I feared the most has come upon me." Like a self-fulfilling prophecy, one misstep and we'd be flying home from Unalakleet, just as so many mushers had before me. But the longer I hesitated, the faster the dogs wanted to descend, so I reluctantly said the thing that had to be said. "Okay." I don't remember everything that happened next. I know I recited the mantra in my head, keep your feet on the runners, keep your feet on the runners. Next thing I knew, the sled was on its side. I was being dragged behind it, clutching the handlebar with a talon-like grip. Whoa, 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 I said as calmly as I could given the circumstances. Kuna had been dumped from the sled at some point on the descent, but was jogging playfully beside me. When the team stopped, Kuna looked down at me, completely amused by the whole affair, as if to say, "Now who's laying down on the job?" I stood and righted the sled, feeling a sharp pain in my knee. Something was definitely wrong, but diagnosis would have to wait. My loose dog, Kuna, was thankfully nearby, appearing fully recovered and playing with the other teammates. This distraction helped. The team was too busy watching Kuna to drag me careening through town. I pulled myself along the gang line to where Kuna had been and prepared to reattach him. Fortunately, he came close enough to flirt with a pretty female on the team, and I grabbed him. Okay, loose dog is addressed. Now the sled. I righted the sled, but the snow hook had fallen from the sled during the descent and was now tangled in the brake. We couldn't go anywhere until I freed it. But how? On a parking lot of ice. I turned the sled back on its side and pulled against the team to create enough slack in the line to untangle the brake. "You okay?" a voice asked. Of course I'm not okay. What kind of question is that? "My brake is stuck," I said, catching my breath. "What?" I saw it was Erickson, so I checked my frustration to a friendlier tone. "My brake, it's stuck." "Ah," he replied. He stepped off his machine and steadied the team to buy me time to fix the brake. This also convinced the dogs that Erickson was part of our human pack and worth following. "It's going to be rough getting out of here, but I think I know a way. Follow me." Out of here? Where were we? I looked around and realized that we were in some kind of plowed back alley or parking lot, and I had a small crowd of spectators. What a humiliating entrance to the first coastal town. This village sees the best mushers in the world and dogs every March during the Iditarod, and here I came, literally being dragged into town like a novice. I ran back to the sled and hopped on just as the team took off after Erickson. He drove his snow machine over a 5-foot snowbank. At the top, I saw it was about 15 feet wide. The front dogs were already jumping another 5 foot down onto another plowed loading dock. Before my sled reached the drop, the leaders followed Erickson by making a 90-degree right turn, all at full speed. Good Lord. The sled slammed down on the ice-covered loading dock, then lurched up the snowbank on the right. As the team continued the turn, the sled began to flip, and I stuck out my left leg to right it, the leg with the bad knee. Slam! The heavy sled and all its weight came down on my foot. A jolt of pain shot through my knee again. "Lean right, Jonathan." And I was flung around the corner. We were now traveling a road paralleling the coast. Phew! At least it was straight. But to the dogs, this was fun, and the ride wasn't over yet. Erickson took a sharp left down a narrow gap between two piles of driftwood onto the Bering seashore. Every tandem pair of dogs that made the turn pulled the sled closer to the inside of the turn until, wham, the sled nose hung up on the protruding driftwood. Jumping from the sled, I ran up and unhitched the tug lines from 2/3 of the dogs, giving myself just enough leverage to pull the team backwards and free the sled. Then we were off again at full speed. The shore was a tapestry of glare ice interwoven with timber debris. I had to dance on the brake and the runners to avoid another crash. Brake, off the brake, balance, brake, stand on the left runner so the right runner can lift over the driftwood, brake, now stand on the right runner, balance on the runners to jump a log, now brake. Whoa. Erickson stopped. Jamie and Jeff stood on the shore. I saw their freight trailers. They were unwinding the team's drop line to attach between the trailers. "How'd it go?" Jamie asked. I was frustrated, and Jamie felt it immediately. "I probably shouldn't talk right now. I'm too upset," I said, limping away in pain. In my mind, the potentially expedition-ending obstacle course I had just run 16 dogs through could have been avoided if he had been there to guide me through town. Jamie knew exactly what I was thinking and voiced it to Erickson. "You shouldn't have let me sleep. You should have woken me up." Hearing him say this immediately diffused my frustration. And the fact was, there may not have been a better way to where we had to park the dogs when the connecting trails between the villages weren't in yet. Perhaps it would have been a train wreck either way. One thing's for sure, I've been spoiled by the team's help guiding me into town in the evenings on the Yukon. And I reminded myself, it's great when you get it, but you shouldn't expect it. That way you can maintain a spirit of gratitude. By the time I'd finished feeding and settling the dogs in, I was calmed down enough to catch up with the guys and hit the local pizza joint for a pizza per man. In the knee, it hurt more than my pride, but it feel better in the morning or worse? Thankfully, I had a day of presentations planned at the school to figure out whether the pain was temporary or the beginning of the end of the expedition. With hundreds more coastal miles ahead, this introduction only confirmed my deep respect for this fierce landscape. The closer we drew to Nome during the coldest, darkest time of the year, the greater the challenges would become. Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying this free recording of my new book, 100 Winters, The Great Race Against Death, I'm just going to ask you to return the favor, get onto Amazon in the link in the show notes here, and order a copy of the book. Or if you want an autographed copy, you can reach out to us on our website, MUSH MAINE, or on our social media accounts. And until next time, Godspeed and happy trails.